Hey everyone. Today and this week, we're going to be talking about Thomas Jefferson's presidency. We're going to have Jefferson this week, and then we'll do two presidents next week. But pretty much in the 13 weeks that we have left, every week, we're going to focus on what happened during a president's term. And that's how we're going to kind of organize the rest of our time together. So this week is about Thomas Jefferson, third president of the United States. Maybe you're familiar. Obviously, he was one of the biggest drafters of the Declaration of Independence and had a lot to his resume as kind of a founding father of the United States. So he definitely kind of was a chosen favorite to be a president of the United States. So let's start off where it says Jefferson changes. And this is what changed with Thomas Jefferson. Now, please remember, he's elected in 1800. And this is kind of called like the Revolution of 1800 because for all of the 1790s, it was Federalist presidents with Washington and Adams. And so Jefferson is your anti-Federalist, what we call a Democratic Republican or a Jeffersonian Republican. So this is the first time that we have a transfer of power from one political party to the next. And now Jefferson was very tied to Washington. Remember, he quit Washington's cabinet because George Washington refused to help the French during the French Revolution. So he left Washington's cabinet over that situation. So Jefferson was not revolutionary in changing the government, but he did reduce the size and influence of the federal government. And that was kind of the big thing for anti-federalists, is they were small government. They didn't believe in big government. So the changes that he made had to do with money. Only custom duties and the sale of Western lands could make the government money. He was very much the opposite of Alexander Hamilton, who was, national bank and taxes. That wasn't the concept that Jefferson had for how a government could raise money. He shrunk the size of the Army and the Navy because it was peacetime, although he did, he did then have to build the Navy back up because we are fastly approaching a war over American sailors getting kidnapped and forced into service into other countries' militaries. So we do have to end up building back up the Navy. But obviously, the military cost a lot of money, and Jefferson did not want to keep a large standing army that was draining American money if we did not need one. So the number one most important thing you have to know about Jefferson's presidency is the Louisiana Purchase, the best land deal in history. And this is a really one of the coolest things you learn about in American history because it's so crazy of a concept that this happened. So you need to always recognize this map, and you need to always recognize the area here in the middle where it says Louisiana Purchase. So everything that is in this chunk of land that is outlined is the Louisiana Purchase. Okay. So what happened was James Monroe, who's a name that you have to recognize in U.S. history. James Monroe was sent by Thomas Jefferson to France to buy the port city of New Orleans down here. So he was sent to France to negotiate to buy New Orleans. When he gets there, Napoleon is in charge of France, and Napoleon is in desperate need of money. And Napoleon was too busy conquering Europe that he did not really care about holding on to territory at that point in the Americas. And so James Monroe shows up in France and says, hey, we'd like to buy New Orleans because it's at the bottom of the Mississippi River, and that would obviously help us territory-wise and trade-wise if we could control the port at the Mississippi River. And Napoleon is like, well, we need money. We'll sell you the whole thing. And for a very good deal, 6 cents an acre. That's how much money that we're willing to sell this for, 6 cents an acre. It was $15 million. This would double the size of the United States. So pretty much the U.S. is only what you see right here. Buying the Louisiana Purchase would double the size of the United States. James Monroe doesn't have time because we don't have telephones, we don't have email. He would have to write written correspondence. It would have to be sent by boat to the United States. Thomas Jefferson would read it, give his reply. It would be sent by boat back to France. We didn't have time for all of this. We needed to make decisions. So James Monroe agrees to buy the Louisiana Territory for $15 million. And when word gets back to Thomas Jefferson, he has such a moral dilemma because he really wants this land. He sees the value in buying this land, but he doesn't believe that's something that he as president, he would have the authority to do. Remember, he's all about small government. So he doesn't think that the president has the ability or should have the power to do this, but he wants to do it. So nowhere in the Constitution did the president have the right to purchase new land for the nation, but it was decided that he has the ability to make treaties with other nations as president. So they considered this making a treaty, and obviously the land was purchased, and it doubles the size of the United States. So now the United States has all this territory, and we need to go explore it. And maybe you've heard of Lewis and Clark. Lewis and Clark was Meriwether Lewis and William Clark, a frontiersman, and then somebody that was in Jefferson's cabinet. And they are sent to explore the new territory for the Louisiana Purchase and to see specifically if there was a water route that would connect the Atlantic to the Pacific. Hopefully, geography-wise, there is no river that connects the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. But this was a huge deal. This exploration was. Sacagawea is famous in this. She was Native American who was taken as a guide to cross this territory because clearly Native Americans were familiar with this territory because it was their territory technically. But they cross all the way to the Pacific Ocean and come back and map out their findings. And that's how we know really like what the territory looks like out there and have a map of the findings. So Lewis and Clark expedition is to explore the Louisiana Purchase. And then as well, lesser known, but it's the Zebulon Pike expedition that it explored the upper Mississippi River Valley. And they said that the Central Plains were too dry for settlement. And that is actually interesting because that is territory that later the U.S. government forces Native American populations to move on to that territory, which you will learn about later. All right, the next thing that you have to know about for Thomas Jefferson is the infamous Midnight Judges scandal, which I really wish we were in class together because this is so applicable to what is happening literally right now, literally in the news at the moment. Maybe, hopefully you can figure it out as I'm talking about it. All right, so the Judiciary Act of 1801 increased the number of federal judges by 16, okay? John Marshall, who is a Federalist, which means he's the Washington and Adams political party, not a Jefferson political party, was appointed Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Okay. This was made so Federalists could have a hold on a branch of the government because Jefferson won the presidency. The Federalists were scared that their opposing party was going to have too much power in the government and kind of undo what the Federalists had done in the 1790s. John Adams, on the last night of his presidency, worked into the night, which is why this is called Midnight Judges, to sign commissions for new judges, meaning he tried to pack courts with Federalist judges before Jefferson took over and would not put Federalist judges, he would put Democratic, Republican judges into these positions. Well, he signs off all these commissions, which means the deal that would put these people in power. All of these commissions are not delivered. And then the next day, Thomas Jefferson became president. So it's basically like John Adams is trying to hire all these judges into positions of power before Thomas Jefferson takes over as president. And when Thomas Jefferson takes over as president, all these people hadn't gotten a piece of paper that said they got their job. Okay? One specific guy doesn't get his commission, doesn't get his piece of paper that says he gets to be a judge. And that was a guy named William Marbury. And he sues to get it because he said Adams was going to make me a judge before he left office. And just because Thomas Jefferson is president now doesn't mean that I shouldn't get to be the judge that John Adams was going to make me. So William Marbury didn't receive his commission. He turned to the Supreme Court to order James Madison to deliver it. And this is the famous court case of Marbury v. Madison. The decision that comes out of this is that the Supreme Court can only declare something unconstitutional. They cannot force Madison to deliver Marbury his judge appointmentship, his commission. And Chief Justice John Marshall is the one who wrote this court case, this famous court case. So I know this is confusing because it's probably a lot of stuff that you've never heard or thought of. But bottom line, this court case says all the Supreme Court can do is declare something unconstitutional. Still to this day, that's the only thing the Supreme Court can do is declare something unconstitutional. They can't make laws. They can't change laws. They can just say if a law is constitutional or not constitutional. That's the only thing the Supreme Court can do. Why this is so interesting and why this applies so much is obviously, as you know, this past week, Ruth Bader Ginsburg died. And with that opens up an appointment to the Supreme Court. The Republicans are trying to rush through a nomination to get a Republican, conservative-minded judge onto the Supreme Court. And the Democrats are trying to block that, to hold off, to hopefully have a Democratic and more liberal nomination for the Supreme Court if they win the election. So it's still the same. John Adams literally was trying to rush through these judges the day he left office as president to block Thomas Jefferson from being able to do it when he took over. So it's just kind of interesting, that 200 years ago, we had people that were trying to do shady things when it came to nominating judges, just like they're trying to do today. All right, so breaking American neutrality. The next thing that you have to know about Thomas Jefferson's presidency is the term impressment. Okay, impressment is where you force someone into military service. All right, so Napoleon is at war with Europe. Napoleon is the famous dictator of France, or the emperor of France, rather, let's say. And France and Britain try to cut off each other's trade. Well, America likes doing business with both France and Britain, and that ticks both of them off that we're playing both of them. We're cheating on France with Britain and we're cheating on Britain with France. So sailors in the Royal Navy of Britain would stop American merchant ships and demand to come aboard to look for deserters, and they would end up kidnapping Americans and forcing them to be in the British Royal Navy. The most famous of this was called the Chesapeake Incident, where the British ship Leopard demanded to board the American ship, the Chesapeake, and then they ended up kidnapping 4 Americans and forcing them into military service on the British ship. This obviously ticks off people in the United States because American soldiers are being kidnapped and our ships are being robbed. Okay. To deal with this, Thomas Jefferson passes the Embargo Act, and the Embargo Act says we are not going to trade with Great Britain or with France. If y'all can't behave, then we're not going to trade with either one of you. Well, that's a horrible idea because trading with them makes us money. If we can't trade with them and they're our 2 biggest trade partners, we're going to lose a lot of money. And we did lose a lot of money. Specifically, the New England shipping economy lost a ton of money. And this caused Jefferson to not be reelected. And James Madison won in 1808. So even though Thomas Jefferson had 2 terms and he really should not have had another term, James Madison still won in 1808. And he allowed trade with anyone to try to stimulate the economy back up. All right. So those are your big things. Hopefully you can fill out everything from your notes that is on there. Please make sure you watch the entire video about Thomas Jefferson's presidency and then take the video quiz, and then you will take your test. Thanks so much.